In April of 1846, the United States went to war with Mexico. Although he was not sent to Mexico as part of Taylor's army, he was pleased to be ordered to California. Sherman thought that this would be an important theater of operations. It is interesting to note that he was joined on this move by Edward Ord and his West Point friend Henry Halleck. I bring up these points on this slide to demonstrate character and not to provide a travelogue. Sherman shipped out on USS Lexington for the trip around the Horn. He was the senior of the 6 Army officers and, as such, in command of all Army personnel aboard. Boredom was the main issue he faced, and solved this problem by reading and writing letters. He gave a detailed description of Rio de Janeiro, which he liked, and Valparaiso, which he did not. In this latter city he learns that the Mexican settlers in California had surrendered to the local Americans, so that when Lexington arrives, the Army will play the role of occupiers and not fighters. They docked in Monterey. There he learned that Robert F. Fremont had subdued the Californios and had refused to give up command to Brigadier General Stephen Watts Kearny. Sherman became a fan of Kearny and had little love for Fremont. When gold was discovered, Sherman was called in to verify that the nuggets brought from Sutter's Mill were actually gold. He determined that they were. There is some issues as to the courts of law being in occupied Mexican territory. It was hoped by many that the discovery could be kept secret, but this was not to be. This caused rapid inflation, such that Sherman could not live on his Army salary. The ever-resourceful Sherman hired himself out as a surveyor. By December 1849, he was ordered to deliver dispatches to Scott in New York, so Sherman left the Golden State. Ellen Ewing made it quite clear, although she wanted to marry him, she did not look forward to being an Army wife. When he returned from California, he asked for and obtained a 7-month leave of absence from the Army. Thomas Ewing and Ellen looked upon this as a good sign that Kump would leave the Army altogether. So, on May 1st, 1850, he and Ellen tied the knot. It was a lavish affair, with the guest list including President Zachary Taylor and the cabinet. Sherman did not leave the Army after the leave, but by 1853 he resigned and took a job as a bank manager in San Francisco. While Ellen liked his position as banker, she hated the West Coast and missed her family. In 1856, he accepted the position of commander of the state militia. He had the rank of major general, but the state was broke and couldn't pay him very much. Fortunately, he kept his banking job. This taught him something about character. First, he was very skilled at multitasking. Second, he found himself in the middle of political corruption, which made him very reluctant to enter politics or have anything to do with politicians. And third, he was command of volunteers who were almost impossible to command. From that, he determined to have nothing to do with volunteers in the future. These 3 things would guide him in the Civil War. The end of the gold rush had caused the banks to fail. Because of his good management, his bank did not. But when it was decided to close his branch, Sherman left to return east. The panic of 1857 finished off the bank, so he was out of work. Kump did the thing he dreaded most, taking a position from his father-in-law. As he feared, he was Thomas Ewing's errand boy, in spite of the fact that he headed up a law firm. In desperation, Sherman applied for readmission into the regular Army. There was no room for recent West Point graduates, let alone someone who had resigned. Another character trait, pride, was both his downfall and support in these times and in the times to come. In June of 1859, Don Carlos Buell, an old friend, told him that there were no spots in the Army but that Louisiana was establishing a military school and that he should apply for the job of superintendent. Although there were some who thought Sherman might be an abolitionist, he told all that had a part in the decision that he was against using force to end slavery. Since he had a reputation as a capable man with a credible military record, he got the job. Sherman worked hard at the job and held the cadets to the same high standards. This was an important part of his character and mindset. He became good friends with the staff in general and David Boyd in particular. You will remember the story about his dinner with Boyd. Boyd wrote of him that he was no scholar, but a man of brilliant and original thought. That and his practicality set him apart from others of his time. On January 26, 1861, Louisiana seceded, and Sherman resigned with a heavy heart. In order to honorably wrap up his affairs, he stayed on until April. In formation, he bid goodbye to the staff and the cadets. He was choked with emotion in delivering his farewell speech. It was clear that William Tecumseh Sherman had a deep love and understanding for the people of the South. To gain more insight, we must briefly look at his view of politicians. To do this, a vignette of a meeting with Lincoln and his brother John will be very illustrative. As proof of his loyalty to the Union, Comp left the South, but it was even more a loyalty to a cause rather than to men. Even family ties to his brother, the Senator John, met their limits. John invited him to Washington and set up a meeting with the president in hopes that he could persuade him to enter the government. His meeting with Lincoln went poorly. The president was not interested in the views of the South, for which Sherman was an expert. Sherman was shocked at how casual the North was treating secession. And even in John he saw just another politician. This view of that profession would stay with him for life. As the clouds of war enveloped the nation that April, job offers came in. First were civilian government positions. Sherman refused these. Then Fort Sumter happened, and more positions in the War Department opened up. John suggested that he go back to Ohio and raise a regiment of volunteers. Sherman's mind was dead set against volunteers. In his letter home, you see his mind at work. The war would be fought, he said, for Union and slavery. He believed that it should be fought over the former and not the latter. If slavery was an issue, the South would fight to the last man, he reasoned. On May 8th, he swallowed his pride and wrote Secretary Cameron asking, really begging, for a position. The War Department offered him either a regular Army commission as a colonel or a major general of volunteers. He chose being a colonel and was given the command of the 13th U.S. Infantry. This clearly demonstrates how his mind was working.